Yeah, let's preview the game because it's happening on Monday. So I will be able to give a proper review, I'm pretty sure, yeah. I will be able to give a proper review. It's on the 11th. So this game is the Premier League Grand Final, to put it in Australian terms, and it is a game that just like it almost transcends football in a way because it's kind of this story of two teams and two organizations and two sets of people that are pushing each other to the absolute limits. And it is at the Etihad, and they've had some famous battles at the Etihad in the past. Obviously, you had the Champions League leg, which Liverpool won, and then you have had the Premier League final 3 seasons ago that City won and Liverpool thought they'd scored, but John Stones' clearance with, I think it was 13 millimetres or like 3 millimetres, it was a very tight margin, um, stopped that from happening and broke Liverpool hearts. But it is a thing of City. Is this a game where Pep overthinks? Because Pep has a tendency to overthink. We see that a lot in the Champions League. Obviously, they have fallen at the Champions League at various stages to teams that they should have beaten. I spoke about that Champions League tie. They should have beaten Liverpool that season. They were a much better team than Liverpool that season. They got knocked out to Monaco, got knocked out to Spurs, to Lyon, and then obviously to Chelsea in the final. And those were games where Pep just did slight little tactical adjustments and tinkered with the team unnecessarily. I think speaking on the Champions League final last year, not playing a defensive midfielder and playing Gundogan as your defensive midfielder was borderline boneheaded decision because it just showed that he panicked in that game because Rodri or Fernandinho were so integral to that system. Well, they were last season, and they were the reason why they were able to have this pretty much front five, which were just like free. Like they could just play whatever system they wanted in an attacking third because they had the security. And not playing one of them gave Chelsea too much freedom and gave them too much. It allowed them to be too big of a threat on the counter attack. And then we saw obviously through that goal where there was a gaping hole in the middle of the defense, and the reason why that was is because Gundogan was caught out of position, and the other midfielders. I'm not too sure who played central midfield in that game, so forgive me, but Gundogan, his obviously attacking instinct and his progressive instinct pushed him higher up the ground and maybe caught himself out of position, and that in turn causes chain reactions of Kyle Walker being in a no man's land because he couldn't press the pass, but he also needed to stay back in position, but he couldn't move because then there was an out ball in behind him, and obviously the run from Timo Werner was exceptional. And that goal doesn't happen if Fernandinho is just there plugging the hole, or Rodri. So you see one slight tactical decision and tinkering of the team can have a drastic effect on the game. And it's not only with the goal, but in an attacking sense as well. I think having an elite defensive midfielder is one of your best attacking weapons because it gives you so much license. I mean, we see now with Liverpool, they have Fabinho rather, as sitting at the base of midfield, and that allows Trent, that allows Robertson and that front three to just play with such freedom. And it's not only a defensive midfielder, but it's also Henderson. I think Jordan Henderson is going to be really key in this game if he starts. I think he might be injured, so I don't know. But someone like a Jordan Henderson or a Fabinho having two very just diligent and sturdy central midfielders gives your team so much freedom. Like the reason why Trent has had such a good season this year is because he's able to come into that right half space, push a little bit more in, push further into the ground and push higher up because Jordan Henderson, or it was oh my god, the lad who got injured has escaped me, but it was Harvey Elliott. That's what it was. It was Harvey Elliott before his injury earlier this season, where he was pushing out wide. They were almost playing overlapping central midfielders on the right hand side, where Trent would come into the half space, and then the right side of centre mid would push out wide, covering that channel, and then also adding that a little bit of defensive security. But that's one of the reasons why Trent has been able to be unlocked this season to a greater extent, because so Henderson did play, and they played Curtis Jones as well. And Curtis Jones is another player that can play that role, that really diligent role. I know Trent didn't play on over the weekend, but Joe Gomez did a fantastic job in pretty much replicating him. So yeah, I'm pretty sure Trent will be fit. I'm not sure. Is he injured? I probably should have researched it, but yeah, Joe Gomez played exceptionally well. So if he can replicate that performance, I think they'll be fine. Though it's a bit sore, but it's alright, we move. So I went on a little bit of a Liverpool tangent there, but with City, for me in this game, they would have to start Kevin De Bruyne as a false nine. The reason for this is a couple fold, if that makes sense. But I'm pretty sure he started as a false nine. No, he didn't. It was Grealish. Okay. What am I thinking? Oh, no. Okay. I think De Bruyne should play as a false nine in this game for a couple of reasons. I know, obviously, he's not as fluid as like a Sterling or a Foden or even Grealish, but he provides that body. And in order to combat Liverpool's defensive midfield or that sturdy midfield, you need to be able to have an outball. Where if City are so good, so they'll probably be able to pass through their midfield anyway. But having De Bruyne up front who can take the ball, play a little bit with his back to goal, but he's also technically one of the best players in the world, so he can take it on a half turn and hit it first time, or he can drive at the defence like he did against Chelsea. Like his goal against Chelsea is something that could be exploited against Liverpool, because Liverpool's back four, although they play very high up the ground, they also love to retreat, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's also because their fullbacks push so high that there's always space like behind the fullbacks. So their two centre halves, Van Dijk and maybe Matip or Kanate or whoever, are inclined to push back rather than being aggressive, because if they're aggressive, that just creates more space in behind. So De Bruyne is a very good player at taking the ball in a half turn and really driving at the defence, and he can shoot from pretty much anywhere and make a good effort of it. So I think De Bruyne should start as that false nine. I'm not too sure how many times he started as that false nine in recent games, but I think if you can have him as that false nine and then really kind of push either side of him with pace, maybe Sterling, maybe Mahrez. I don't know if they're both fit or if there's any injuries, but having pace either side. And I think Bernardo Silva played a fantastic game against Liverpool early this season. He could be a talisman in a way, where he can unlock that, because he so technically gifted, Bernardo Silva. But I think De Bruyne as a false nine could be the key to unlocking the very few faults in the Liverpool defence. Moving on to Liverpool in terms of how they can win this game even. And I think I spoke a little bit about it. What I said before is that their midfield, it just needs to be sturdy type thing, and giving the fullbacks license to roam and giving that front three license to roam is something that's so vital in this game. So I would play a midfield of both Fabinho and Henderson if possible, because if they're both fit, that is. The reason of this is twofold. It's twofold. It's one, purely for the defensive solidity that it provides. Like, no doubt that both Henderson and Fabinho are both defensive minded midfielders. They're both players that like to play on the back foot, which isn't a bad thing. By back foot, I mean their tendency is to play a little bit more defensive and to play a bit conservative, which isn't a bad thing at all. Yeah, so that reason, and also because it allows what I said, freedom. And I go back to that word freedom because that's why Liverpool are so good, is because their attacking players are given so much freedom. Obviously, because Van Dijk is one of the best centre halves in the world, and because Fabinho and Henderson, if they play together, can shut down any counter attack. Are really good at just recycling the ball as well, which is very important. And they're also bodies. I know Fabinho is pretty lanky and pretty tall. Henderson is a prick when he plays. He loves to get stuck in, which Liverpool fans love, I would assume. As your captain, you'd want him to be. So, yeah, I would start both Fabinho and Henderson. Who do you play with them? Is it a Thiago? Is it a Curtis Jones? Do you shove him in the limelight and say, okay, be that maybe the more advanced of the three in midfield, play that number 8 role and try and make a difference? I don't know. Obviously, talent-wise, Thiago is by far the better option because he's just brilliant. And something that has just come to my mind is James Milner played the first game against City this season. I think he did play a right back, and Phil Foden gave him an absolute bath. So whether it's Joe Gomez or Trent playing on the right side of the fence, I'm pretty sure Trent's injured. I just want to make sure of that. No, he was on the bench, so he's not injured. I'm not sure they even have any injuries, to be honest. But I just need to double check this. No, they don't. Curtis Jones is injured. Oh, that's because he got subbed off. Right, okay. So maybe you don't play Jones. Maybe you play Thiago and give him that further license to push up the ground. Push up the pitch and make those final third passes in between the lines. But potentially the only issue with Fabinho, Henderson and Thiago in that midfield is that they could get overrun by like a Bernardo Silva because none of them are really physically imposing. Like they're not like a N'Golo Kante type centre mid where he can just go all day, very quick, very dynamic. They're all very just sturdy. So potentially that's an issue which I'm pretty sure Klopp would know how to counteract that because he's Jurgen Klopp. So obviously you got to be wary that Milner probably won't play right back this game, so Foden won't have, well, if Foden plays on the left, Foden won't have that freedom and that ability to skin his opponent. Obviously Trent isn't the best defender in the world, but he's still very solid. Like I think he gets underrated in his defensive ability. He's still very good, right? So I think both goals did come from the left-hand side in that game for City. So yeah, it's gonna be a time where it's gonna be a game which is decided by moments, I think, and it's gonna be if Pep overthinks it or not. Do I think he overthinks it? I probably not. Like I said, I would start De Bruyne as a false 9, and I would play Rodri holding as an absolute must. Yeah, like this game's going to be one of those where it's gonna be like a big match feel. Like it's gonna have that hype around it. It's gonna have that intensity around it. Yeah, I think players that could make a difference. Luis Diaz, it's his time, I think, to just really pronounce himself as a Liverpool player. And also Jack Grealish. I mean, two new signings who... I mean, Luis Diaz has played very well in his brief stint in Merseyside, but Jack Grealish hasn't hit the ground running as what some fans thought he would. He still played very well, and he's still a very good player. But, yeah, it's one of those things where they need a game. They need a game to announce themselves, and I think it could be one of those games for either of those two players. Prediction... Oh, jeez, this game is so tough to predict. I'm going to go with 2-1. because Ruben Diaz is out, which is a massive loss, and it could prove to be potentially game changing. I mean, I don't know if he's out. It says mid-April on FOTMob, so if he ends up playing and I get my prediction wrong because of it, blame FOTMob. But I'm going to go with 2-1 Liverpool. I reckon Diaz with a brace. And Diaz with a brace, and we'll give Foden a go as well. I love Foden. So I reckon Diaz will score first. Foden will return the favour, and then Diaz will score in the second half with about half an hour to play, give or take. So yeah, City fans, don't come at me, please. And it's going to be your fault if you lose, not mine. So yes, I'm just looking at the depth. Yeah, so it's Ake and Laporte played in the last game, which is interesting. I don't think Diaz was on the bench. Diaz is not on the bench, so if he plays, that's not my fault for getting it wrong. So I think that's enough for the title race chat.